Hi, Lou Pulsifer here to talk about the non-human part of games, the programmed opponent, usually but not always a computer opponent, that some people call artificial intelligence, but I'm going to try to avoid using that term because it's nothing like artificial intelligence. Anything approaching true artificial intelligence is rare and probably doesn't exist at all. Moreover, you couldn't afford to spend the time to write a real artificial intelligence. For that matter, you don't want the computer opponent to be too good, or the players will think it's cheating. So you need something that pretends or fakes being a human, that has some unpredictability preferably so people can't figure it out and easily get around it, but that is not too good as a player. And of course you need something that can be set to multiple difficulty levels. On the other hand, it needs to be good enough, and it's more often the case that the computer opponent is bad rather than good. And a bad computer opponent ruins a game if the primary action in the game is to play against the computer. So some people, I think a lot of people, would say it's the most important part of game software. The user interface is the competitor. Because even if a game has a multiplayer element, if it can be played solo, many people are going to play solo against the computer opponent. In fact, there are people who will tell you that if you make a small computer game, for example for a tablet, something like that, and you don't have a computer opponent, then it's going to fail. Obviously there are many exceptions. Now, some books have been written about writing the computer opponent, although again they usually use the term artificial intelligence, and it's much too complex a subject to discuss here. Now, as for the programmed tabletop opponent, that has to be programmed usually with a deck of cards, and it's not very good. And that's inevitable. How much can you do in programming with a deck of cards? If you know anything about programming, not much. So most such opponents are more or less random, or largely random. And of course there are video games where the computer opponent is random, for example in the video game Tetris. On tabletop games, the more you can rely on the players to help the programmed opponent, the better you can make the programmed opponent. But that opens up a can of worms in itself. And that is that players can then argue about what the programmed opponent actually meant. But if you have a cooperative game or a solo game, then you're not going to have that problem. There's a virtue in simplicity. As I said, this course isn't about programming, and there are whole books about writing a computer opponent if you're stuck with that job.